You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowing like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the third part of What If Deku Enters Fate Stay Night. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of bubbajack on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Tosaka Rin blames Zelrich for her current predicament. The moment she stepped through the portal, she was greeted by the sight of the Fantastic Four if the spandex-numbered suits were any indication eating breakfast. Surrounding the table as well were two young children roughly 2 years apart, with the older of the two being a boy approximately 8 and the girl looked to be 6 years old. An awkward pause filled the air as the team of heroes stared down the unknown girl in their midst. Tension mounted with every passing second. Ever so slowly, Rin allowed her hand to drift towards her pocket where she kept her gems. Mr. Fantastic, ever the humanitarian, attempted to establish a line of communication with their sudden guest. "Miss, can we help you?" Sliding her hands into her pockets and preparing for a confrontation, Rin replied, "As a matter of fact, yes you can. If you would kindly hand over the infinity gem without any fuss, I can be on my way." Reed felt his wife's gaze on the side of his head like that of a laser sight. "Reed, what is she talking about?" "Stretch." Ben grunted out, getting to his feet, ready for a brawl. Johnny was less tactful than the rest. "Dude, please tell me you don't actually have a dang infinity gem on you. We have enough problems just being us without you adding fuel to the fire." The thing snorted, "That's funny coming from you, hothead. Now is not the time, you two." Susan snapped before turning to the girl before her and asking, "How do you know about the infinity gems, miss?" Tosaka Rin, "As for how, well, I have my sources." She smiled knowingly. Mr. Fantastic took to his feet, inquiring, "What do you want with the infinity gems?" Giving a cat-like smile, she replied, "Who knows? But I know that something that powerful shouldn't be left in the hands of any man, no matter how righteous he may seem." "You plan to get rid of them?" He deduced, "Impossible. I've already tried." Rin folded her arms and scoffed, "Apparently you didn't try strong enough." She held out her hand, "Now are you going to hand the gem over, or am I going to have to take it? Personally, I hope it's the former, as I don't like the idea of children potentially getting caught in the crossfire." The Jewel Craft user's gaze flicked to the two children briefly. Reed was worried about that very thing should it come to a clash. On the one hand, Susan could keep the children protected. On the other, if she did that, they would be down a member of the team. They also had no idea what this woman was capable of, or if her word could be trusted. Could Ben, Johnny, and he take this unknown woman? He decided to try. "I'm sorry, but I'll have to refuse." Tosaka sighed, "I was afraid you'd say that." Reinforcing herself and moving faster than the eye could see, she flicked 5 gems out at the speed of bullets. Flame on. Johnny's form was bathed in flame, only for 3 rubies to come into contact with him. "Oh, Ruben der Erde absorbiert die Flamme." On her command, the rubies glowed, forming a triangle around the flaming mutant before they proceeded to seek the heat and flames from his form. A brilliant cornflower blue sapphire smacked Mr. Fantastic in the head, sinking into his skull on impact, absoluter nullpunkt. A blast of Arctic chill surrounded the RBB man. Fog like that of dry ice came off his form, and he was immobile like a statue. "What did you do to the egghead?" Grim demanded, taking a menacing step forward. "Sorry, but a magician never reveals their secrets on principle." She finished by giving him a childish wink. Cracking his knuckles, the thing replied, "That's it, girly. It's clobbering time." The red-clad magus let him take all of 3 steps. With a smile, she said, "Have a nice trip Golem-san, Zerbrechtlicher Kreis." A magic circle 10 feet around sprang up, centered on the brown agate she had thrown on the floor, with an identical glyph appearing on the ceiling. The moment the thing stepped into the affected area, the floor made of concrete and reinforced steel over wooden paneling collapsed, giving way beneath his weight like wet paper. He fell to the floor below that and kept falling as the floors of the Baxter building kept giving way until he landed in the second-floor parking garage. Sighing, Rin said to herself, "Well, that was more difficult than it needed to be." Turning to the last remaining member of the Fantastic Four, she asked, "I don't suppose you know where this power gem is, so I can take it and leave, do you?" The 2 women stared each other down. Susan glared while standing protectively in front of her children with a barrier up, while Rin stared back nearly impassive, waiting for an answer. Finally, Susan replied, "No, I don't." To which Rin replied, "You wouldn't tell me even if you did, yes." She sighed, "You're such a hero. It's so exasperating." She finished putting a hand to her temple as if to ward off an incoming headache even as she smiled fondly. The invisible woman found herself confused. The younger girl before her. She shows up out the blue, politely asks for one of the most powerful items in existence. When she was denied, she disabled her husband, brother, and friend with a few words and without having to move. Then she talks about heroes as if was a headache-inducing fond memory. Susan watched as her arm glowed blue and she placed a hand on the wall moments before a pulse of energy surged out. It washed over her barrier, rendering it temporarily visible before trailing on. Moments later the pulse returned from the opposite direction. Ouch, how on earth did he manage this? How did he ever sort through all the irrelevant data? Rin muttered to herself, walking off. "Wait, what was that?" she inquired after the younger woman. Rin ignored her, just wanting to get this blasted gem and get out of here, while possibly stopping somewhere to get some very strong aspirin for her now throbbing headache. Yet it was the words of a young child that stopped her dead. "You're a magician, aren't you, Tosaka-san?" Turning back towards the table and locking her aquamarine eyes with the sky-blue ones of the 4-year-old blonde girl who calmly sat there, assessing her like a scientist would a lab specimen. Instead of answering, she asked, "How did you know I was Japanese?" "You mean besides your obvious Asian descent?" "Well, you used an honorific Uncle Ben when you sent him through the hole in the floor. Also, you used German to cast your spells. Quite interesting if I do say so myself." Tosaka smiled a fake smile. "This girl reminds me way too much of Ilya." She thought before adding, "Well, aren't you just a smart little ankle biter? I don't suppose you'd know where your daddy keeps all his important things, would you?" "Yes." She smiled angelically, much akin to the devil, "But I'm not telling you." Rin sighed before huffing, "Brat." She turned away waving her hand, "But that's fine, I'm pretty sure I know where it is." She stopped in front of a white marble fireplace above which a family portrait sat in a gold-gilded frame, depicting all present though younger and in more casual attire. The girl she had just been verbally sparring with was just a babe in her mother's arms when this was painted. Reinforcing her arms, Rin took the frame down, revealing an intricate-looking safe. It had all sort of fancy gadgets and gizmos. She couldn't even begin to decipher what each was supposed to do. Such was the curse of being born into a lineage of magi. Thankfully for her, however, such technical know-how was unneeded as she had reinforcement. She reared back her fist, and struck. Expecting to see the steel crumple under her blow like tinfoil. Only to have pain reverberate down her arm all the way to her shoulder in response. Grabbing her fist in pain, she noted that her knuckles were scraped and bleeding and that the safe door didn't even have a scratch on it. What on earth is this thing made out of? Adamantium. Turning slowly, with a rictus-like grin on her face, Rin saw the little she-devil smiling knowingly. Stalking towards her, yet not too close as to agitate the girl's mother, she asked, "Adamantium? Pray tell, what is that?" "A nigh-indestructible alloy." She replied. "Valeria," her mother said warningly. To which the girl replied, relax mother. If she truly wished to harm us, do you honestly think your barrier would have been able to stop her from what she's shown thus far? No, she has no intention of hurting us of her own volition. A sudden loud crack echoed throughout the room. All heads turned towards the source, that of the Human Torch. The 3 rubies that surrounded him in a triangle formation and had been sapping away his flames had begun to crack. Rin blanched, reaching into her coat pockets for more jewels. Just how much energy can he produce? His maximum output is 16.5 hours, and if released all at once has been equated to that of a supernova or a nuclear warhead with a blast zone of 900 feet, Valeria replied, her voice tense. SHT, 3 rubies aren't nearly enough. The Magus said, throwing out 6 more in an attempt to bleed off the extra energy. The invisible woman looked between her daughter and Rin. Tosaka. Valeria, what? Oh no, Johnny, he's dash. Yes, her daughter replied, sounding grave. His sheer output is overloading the absorption array she set up. Once they reach critical mass, they will explode, causing a chain reaction. Essentially, Uncle Johnny has been turned into a living time bomb thanks to this girl. I'm working on it, brat. Rin shouted over her shoulder as the 6 extra gems she threw out also cracked even as the original 3 began to bulge unnaturally. Well, work faster, or we're all going to die. Okay, throwing more jewels at the problem is just going to make it worse. I guess I could use that. I would need to invert it, but it should work. I don't seem to have any other choice, but still, but to use it on this? Damn it, looks like I don't have any other choice. Region Bogan Collective. Region Bogan Collective was meant to be a facsimile of the Rainbow Sword Zelrich. The collective prana of 100 jewels, all equal to an A-rank attack, unleashed at once in a single strike. Or in this case, a supercharged barrier. It was quite the appealing sight to behold. Gems of all size, type, cut, and clarity flew out from the Magus's crimson jacket, each shining with an inner fire. They began to spin slowly at first before rapidly picking up speed, becoming a halo of rainbow light. The wind picked up to gale-like levels just as the first of the rubies finally gave way, causing the others to topple like dominoes. The 2 forces pressed against one another. The plasmic flame wanting to expand outwards and consume, the ring of light unyieldingly squeezing it inwards. Rin's knees began to shake as she felt her magecraft begin to give way to the mounting pressure of the expanding supernova. Yet she persevered. For she was the heir to the House of Tosaka, one of the 3 founding families of the Fuyuki Holy Grail system, and an average one with first-rate magic circuits. If servants shades of heroes of legend couldn't kill her, then there was no way this could. Not now, not when she was older and wiser than she was back then. She activated her magic circuits and her magic crest before pouring almost everything she could muster into the ongoing spell. For a brief moment, Rin thought she had it under control. She saw the blaze being pushed back, the firestorm beginning to dim. But Rin was cursed with the last name of Tosaka, and thus even when she won, she lost. For just as she was feeling confident in her ability to contain this mess she made, the halo of light began to fade. Eyes widening, she sent up a silent prayer, please no, no, no. Just hang on a little longer. For the children. Alas, it was not to be. The swirling vortex of light first dimmed, then flickered like a cheap light bulb before finally dying completely. While her spell was unable to completely stop the blast, it diluted it enough to just limit it to the Baxter building. Of course, none of that mattered as an intense wave of heat washed over her reinforced body, flinging her bodily out of a 50-story glass window and through several buildings before she crash-landed into something wooden. Her vision was blurry, and her hearing was fading in and out. She could hear an old man yelling. Rabial Lansao. Rin felt tired, so very tired. Her last thought before her eyes drooped close was, well, at least those kids are all right. Seal had her back pressed up against a stone pillar, a .40 Glock 19 in either hand. Her cover was rapidly dwindling under eldritch bombardment. Dashing out from behind cover, she fired her weapons, the bullets transmogrifying into black keys mid-flight. Her target, Sorcerer Supreme Dr. Stephen Strange, teleported the blades into the far wall with a contemptuous flick of his finger. "Young lady, I would prefer to talk about this." In response, Seal fired her magically modified Glocks, once again having long since delved into Roa's magical knowledge just to survive against this man. Back home, she was called a monster, one who could kill other monsters. Compared to the man before her, she may as well be a flea compared to a Saint Bernard. Holding up a single finger, he said, "Stop." The black key stopped in midair, hanging right in front of his finger. Roaring in frustration, the executioner fired her weapons, until they clicked on empty, creating a veritable wall of blades in front of the man. Tossing her now useless guns aside, she allowed crimson-colored tattoos in the form of various holy sigils appear on her arms. Now in her powered state, she blitzed towards him, hoping to exploit the weakness most magi had when it came to close-quarters combat. Strange had to admit he was impressed with the speed of and strength of the intruder into his sanctum sanctorum. The ground shattered beneath her feet as she sped towards him at the speed of a bullet. But he was prepared for such a thing. Utilizing his cloak of levitation, he took to the skies, avoiding her entirely. The Sorcerer Supreme then called upon the power of a god whom he paid tribute. "I call upon the crimson bands of Sidorak." From his fingertips came crimson threads of energy, each an inch thick. They wrapped themselves around the executioner like constrictive serpents, binding her in place. Alighting on the floor, he said, "Now you're going to tell me what you want here." I sensed several disturbances in the barrier between this dimension and another. "I want to know who you're working for, what they want." The priestess spat on the floor in response. Sighing, the MSTR magician replied in forced calm, "You can either tell me willingly, or I can take the answer by force from your mind. Something I am loath to do, but I will if I have to." A shudder passed the hardened killer. If there was one thing she couldn't stand above all else, it was mental violation. Not after Roa. "Okay, I'll tell you, just please don't." Not that. There was a story here he knew. This girl before him had been manipulated mentally before, but now was not the time for that. Right now, he needed answers. "Alright, tell me everything you know." She did, and the more his eyes widened in fear. Calling to Wong, he told his assistant and friend, "Watch over her. I have something I must do." Without waiting for a response, he closed his eyes, entering a meditative trance. His mind now open to the greater universe, Strange was quickly able to home in on the location of his target. After locking onto it, he opened a portal. Waving his hands and muttering under his breath, he conjured a sphere of wind around his head before calmly stepping through his portal. The Sorcerer Supreme found himself on the planet, Mercury. The heat from the sun was being negated by the blue atmosphere overhead. Laying on the ground before him baking in the heat was Namor the Submariner, King of Atlantis and fellow Illuminati member. Sitting in a beach chair a few feet away under an umbrella was someone who would make Loki of the Asgard rip his hair out in frustration. A name whispered in both equal parts reverence and revilement across the dimensions to those with magic. One even the Vishanti themselves hated and feared in equal measure. Walking past his fellow Illuminati member, and sending him through a portal back to his oceans as he did, Strange inclined his head in greeting, Wizard Marshal Zelrich. Glancing up from the book he was reading, the vampire appraised the Sorcerer Supreme before him. So you're the Ancient One's replacement, eh? Dr. Stephen Strange? I am. I would like to know just what you're up to, Wizard Marshal. What need could you possibly have for the Infinity Gems? Closing, Paradise Lost, by John Milton, the vampire replied, absolutely none, lad. This was never about the gems. Gods know all, but the last gem has been found in my own dimension anyway. Strange was dumbfounded. But your associate said. Zelrich cut him off saying, she knows only what I want her to know. Dr. Strange narrowed his eyes in suspicion. Then what was this really about, Zelrich? Smirking, he held his hands out and replied, I surrender, take me to jail. Do I still get my one phone call before you imprison me on the raft? Sighing, he magically bound the vampire's wrists before leading him away, silently hoping to get answers, yet already knowing better. Miriam had to admit, he hadn't had this much fun in quite some time. He sat on the back of the King of the Sky, the rainbow-hued manta ray floating his right arm. Lady Windup was having fun. The giant mecha was doing her best to swat the man, Tony Stark, out of the sky as he zipped around in his armor. The closest thing he could equate it to was someone trying to get rid of a particularly annoying fly. He continued to watch the scene play out before him. Stark flew around firing all manner of weaponry, from laser beams to rockets. None of them were leaving a dent in the metallic behemoth before him. He had no idea where the thing came from or what it wanted, but he had to stall it long enough for the rest of the Avengers to show up. Repulsors and missiles did nothing to it, and every time it swung its arm the sheer amount of displaced air sent him careening through the skies. "Sir, we have an incoming call from Mr. Rogers," Jarvis told him. Having just avoided being splattered on the pavement for the dozenth time in the past 3 minutes, Tony told the AI, "Put him through." "Cap, I hope you guys are close, 'cause things are getting dicey down here." "We're coming in hot, Tony. We'll be there in T-60 minutes." The armored Avenger shouted into the comlink. "Seconds, what's your status?" Captain America asked. He got whiffed by the long blades attached to the automaton's arms, which sent him spinning in the air and slamming into a wall. "Eating dirt at the moment, Cap." "Just what at that thing?" Cap wondered aloud, amazement clear in his tone. "An indestructible giant robot, it has a pet manta ray." "Hang on, I see someone on top of the giant manta ray. Possible hostile." Peeling himself off the side of the building he replied, "Possible hostile or probable reason they're here in the first place." "How much you wanna bet?" Cap said, wind rushing by in the background as he and the other Avengers leaped from the Quinjet, and landing on a nearby building. "I don't take suckers' bets." "What's the game plan, Cap?" Tony asked, flying over to his fellow Avengers, Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye. Noticing someone was missing, he asked, "Where's Thor?" "He's inbound. For now, I want you and Hulk to just hold that thing off while the rest of us apprehend that person up there." America pointed towards the flying monstrosity. Turning to the Hulk, he said, "You up for it, Chuckles?" "Hulk smash big machine." Without another word he leaped towards the mecha, which had been searching in vain for Stark, and punched it full in the face, sending it stumbling. "I'll take that as a yes," the Golden Avenger said before flying back into the fray. Cap turned to Widow and Hawkeye. "Let's move." Seeing the trio making their way towards him across the rooftops, Miriam decided to up the ante, so to speak. With a flash of light accompanied by a thunderous crash, Central Park was turned into a wasteland. In its place stood the demon of the right leg, the bell of ending, which had just tolled for the Avengers. For the beast of God had descended on the earth. It was a giant whale dog with a length from snout to the tail of just over 2 football fields. With stone statuary clinging to its oily black skin like barnacles to the bottom of a ship, its trio of tails lashing back and forth like excited dogs, shredding the ground and shattering glass for miles around as the sound barrier was so casually broken again and again in seconds. The whale dog pranced over to where his MSTR sat, making the ground quake with every step. Its tail smashing builds to pieces as it made its way forwards. Groaning piteously, the whale dog was hoping for a treat from his creator. "Sorry boy, I don't have any of the Forest of Inash on me at the moment." Hearing the beast in disappointment, Miriam gently reprimanded, Now, none of that. I can feed you later. Right now, see that green fellow over there?" Miriam pointed to the Hulk, who had just punched Lady Windup through a building while screaming, "Smash!" Seeing the beast nod, he said, "Sick, M." Letting out a booming sound that was a cross between a dog's bark and a whale's keening, the whale dog lumbered forward, earth-shattering with every step. Satisfied that Lady Windup would not be overwhelmed so easily, Crown turned his attention to the remaining three. Patting the king of the sky on his head, he said, "A distraction is needed, my friend." In response, the demon of the left leg flapped its flipper-like wings. The actual reason the king of the sky had rainbow-colored wings, was because they were composed of every variety of animal species. With but a flap of its wings, the king of the sky could recreate any beast that once walked the planet's surface. Be it magical or mundane. Its collective power was that of all the creatures that challenged man in the past. It was no surprise when the three stopped and stared in awe at the flaming bronze bird that was the size of an ostrich that had entered their midst. Miriam couldn't blame them, birds such as that hadn't been seen since the times of the Greeks. When Heracles shot the Stymphalian birds out the sky with his bow, the bronze-coated bird flapped its wings, fanning the flames from its body towards the three heroes, who scattered. Black Widow shot at the creature with her widow's bite. The electric voltage caused the metallic bird to squawk in annoyance and attempt to gore her with its bronze spear-like beak. Said beak clanged off Captain America's shield, after which the first Avenger bashed the divine beast in the face while Romanoff proceeded to shoot it, and Hawkeye loosened a couple of arrows into its feet, pinning it in place. The Stymphalian stumbled back, shaking its head and snapping at the bullets in annoyance. "Cap hit it in the head. I've got an idea," Hawkeye told him. Nodding, the Star-Spangled Avenger threw his shield, bouncing it off the bird's head. Catching it, he rolled into a rising uppercut, striking the bird under its beak with his shield. Seeing his opening, Hawkeye drew his bow taut and fired an arrow into the creature's throat. Seconds later an incessant beeping was heard. "Cap, get down," the archer called. Needing no prompting, the Avenger curled into a ball and covered himself with his shield moments before the arrow exploded, showering his shield in molten metal. Rogers looked out from his cover to see the beast headless moments before it faded away into dust. "Good going, Bart. Tasha, you okay?" "I'm fine, you?" Romanoff asked. "I'm good," Steve confirmed before turning his head towards a high-pitched buzzing noise. "Never mind that last bit." For heading towards the three was the 8th plague of Egypt reborn. A giant swarm of locusts was heading their way. The Hulk was angry. It was a natural state of being for one such as him. He hated everything. Banner. The puny humans who kept trying to hurt him and wouldn't leave him alone. Banner. The fact that everything around him was so fragile. Banner, he really didn't like Banner. But now he had something new to hate for an entirely different reason. No matter how strong he tried and how much he hit the thing, the ugly dog wouldn't leave him be. "Ugly dog, leave Hulk alone." He roared before punching it once again. It smashed its entire side into no less than 3 buildings, but it just pushed itself up, gave itself a shake and kept coming. Hulk said. He jumped, releasing a haymaker onto the thing's chin, causing it to fly end over end. "Go away, ugly dog." The whale dog flew over the skyline, crashing into the Hudson, creating a gigantic waterspout. It enraged in short order, using its giant tongue to lap up a quick drink before going to find its new favorite playmate. As it made its way towards land, it saw the sky darken and heard a voice shout, "Feel the wrath of mine hammer, beast." A bolt of lightning split the heavens, striking the demon of the millennial rank on the center of its back. Due to being wet and submerged in water, it just hurt that much more for the whale dog. It gave out a piteous this one filled with suffering and pain. Another bolt struck the beast, causing it to roll onto its back, belly up. Seeing the beast fade into the ether, Thorodinson nodded, pleased that such a thing had been removed from the face of Midgard. Not since eras long past had such beasts roamed freely amongst the realm of men. For one to be here now. What terrors do mine companions face? Thor wondered before flying off into the greater fray. Miriam's eyes widened in surprise. Someone or something had defeated his left leg. Such an event was unprecedented. Only the guards of the Black Princess should be able to fight and beat his creations, and even then, at the cost of mutual destruction. Yet here, in this dimension, the beast of the earth had met its end. It was inconceivable to him. He saw the storm clouds heading his way, and felt the raw power of the human at their head. A divine spirit. An actual divine spirit capable of manifesting in physical form. Miriam was giddy at the thoughts this place presented. But even more than that, he really wanted to get his hands on some divinity-infused BLD if he could. Sadly, the god in question, Thor, if the hammer, lightning, and screams were any indication, didn't seem to be in a sharing kind of mood. Iron Man let out a relieved sigh after hearing the first thunderclap. Once he figured out the thing wasn't too bright, he'd taken to flying in front of its face and making it smack itself. This worked for a time, but Iron Man decided to try and do a bit more damage. Perching on the thing's shoulder, he shot it in the face. The mecha stabbed itself in retaliation. He did this time and time again, the automaton getting more and more furious with him as time went on. Its swipes and artillery fire was coming in so fast he was having trouble avoiding it all now. So he was grateful when the behemoth was struck with several bolts of lightning, and a twister lifted it up off its feet and launched it through the air. With the thing now off his back, the armored Avenger proceeded to blast the multitude of bugs surrounding his three teammates with his repulsors. "You alright, guys?" "We're fine, but that thing needs to go down," he said, pointing at the Technicolor manta ray. "Verily, allow me." Thor said SWNGNG Mjolnir, and calling down the wrath of the heavens. "Thou hast no right to be here, foul creature. Begone." So says Thor. A blinding flash of light struck the king of the sky, severing its left wing clean off. Miriam knew he'd lost the moment the divine took the field, but with literally no leg to stand on, and his left leg sticking out like a sore thumb just floating there. He looked at his remaining limb. His right arm. There was one thing he could do. The Avengers warily approached the area where the huge flying beast landed before disappearing, keeping their eyes peeled for the summoner of these monsters. What they found, they couldn't believe. Laying there in the dirt was a limbless boy of about 14, with dark eyes and hair that were of sharp contrast to his pale skin. Rogers rushed towards the boy, only to be pulled back by the god of thunder. "What are you doing?" "He needs dash. He is the summoner of the beasts. I feel great power coming from him, even now. Be cautious, friend," Thor warned. Now on edge, the group moved towards the lame boy. He smiled at them as they approached. "Why, hello there, have you come to offer me your unconditional surrender?" Tony couldn't help himself. "Us, surrender? You kid, are the one disarmed, and dislegged. 'Tis but a flesh wound. Come over here, and I'll bite off your ankles," he promised, grinning and showing his fangs. Natasha walked around him before picking him up by the scruff of his robes and saying, "You sure are plucky. I'll give you that." "Why, thank you. I try to err on the side of optimism." He sniffed the air. "Oh, my favorite, and something a little extra too, unless I'm wrong." The former spy narrowed her eyes. "You are a vampire, aren't you?" "Guilty as charged," he replied, allowing his eyes to briefly flash red. "So," Tony asked, "do we need a cross, garlic, can we just blow his head off?" A portal opened in front of the group then, and Doctor Strange stepped forth. "I shall take him if it's all the same to you Avengers." "Strange, what's going on?" Captain America asked. Sighing he replied, "This is a matter of magic, my friend, please allow me to handle this. It is my duty as Sorcerer Supreme." "If this is a matter of magic like you say, then where were you earlier?" Iron Man questioned. "Dealing with one of his compatriots. The Fantastic Four, Namor, and King Black Bolt were also attacked by the same group," he told the armored Avenger, hoping he'd get the point. I see. What did they want?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "I don't know, but I intend to find out. If you would hand him over." "I don't dash." "Just do it, Cap," Tony said. "Tony?" Steve turned, questioning his friend. He pointed to Strange and said, "He's asking nicely right now. I may not believe in magic, but I know if he really wanted to, he could take all of us down. So just give him the kid, before he decides to take him from us." Natasha looked grim. "He's right. He could do all that. We could end up who knows where, and he'd still have the kid. Hulk don't want to go anywhere." The not-so-jolly green giant grunted. Seeing similar looks on the faces of the rest of the team and knowing Tony was right, he nodded to Widow, who handed the boy over. He looked rather glum about the exchange, saying, "Oh phew, I preferred being in the young lady's custody honestly. Sorry, but I'm afraid you and yours will be staying with me for a time." Strange then gestured to the wanton destruction around him before invoking his principal patrons. "I invoke the Vishanti to cleanse the wounds upon this land." Before their very eyes, buildings pulled themselves back together, Central Park became a vibrant oasis in a concrete jungle rather than a void wasteland, and in short order, everything was right with the world. It was as if the gigantic monstrosities had never shown up. A gesture of goodwill and thanks. Strange said by way of explanation, "Good day, Avengers." Strange took his captive and walked through the portal, closing it behind him, leaving a group of mostly confused Avengers standing in the street. Almost all of them had no idea what was really going on. All but one of them. The first thing Aoko taught her student was human anatomy. Reinforcement was only as effective as the practitioner knew their own body. She started with the largest organ in the human body, the skin. Did you know your skin is an organ, Izuku? It's actually the largest one in the human body. Seeing him shake his head, he asked, "What's it do, Aozaki-sensei?" Smiling at the eager look on his face, pencil at the ready to jot down notes, she told him, "Its job is to protect the rest of the body against pathogens, germs, and the like. The skin has 7 layers to it. Epidermis, the outer skin, has 3 layers, and the dermis, which is the true skin that contains blood capillaries, nerve endings, sweat glands, and hair follicles. It consists of 4 layers. I'll be teaching you how to make each of these as strong as steel." "Okay. What do I need to do first, Aozaki-sensei?" Aoko ruffled his hair before saying, "Relax, kiddo. Before we start, I need to show you something important." Izuku could tell by the slow, deliberate way in which she now spoke that whatever it was she was about to show him was a thing he should commit to memory. "What is it, Aoko-sensei?" "Observe." She took a decorative glass sphere from the coffee table, and after holding it in her palm for a moment, it shattered into so many shards in her palm. Seeing the surprised look on his face, she asked, "Do you know why that happened, Izuku?" Seeing him rapidly shake his head, Aoko explained, "This is what happens when you push too much prana into an object. It shatters. Now imagine what would have happened if I'd recklessly let you try to reinforce yourself without proper instruction." Izuku gulped, paling, but Aoko wanted to hammer the message home, so she continued, "If you had done this recklessly and screwed up, your skin, flesh, organs, and bone would all rupture and shatter, leaving you a bloody broken mess. This is your first lesson. To be a magus and wield magic is to walk hand in hand with death." She paused, allowing her words to hang in the solemnly for a moment before continuing, "One mistake with your magic, and you're dead. Miscalculate an experiment, overtax your magic circuits, and any number of other instances can kill you. You need to take this seriously, understand?" His head moving up and down so rapidly it blurred, he stuttered out, "Why yes, Aozaki-sensei." Seeing he understood just how dangerous magic could be, she nodded before deciding to inject levity back into the conversation. "Luckily for you, if you screw up, I can fix you, so don't worry too much, okay?" "All right." Izuku replied, regaining some color in his face as he did so. "Okay, so the first thing I want you to practice is using structural analysis on yourself. The better you know your body, the easier it'll be to reinforce yourself. For now just focus on your skin, alright?" He did as she said, for the next 5 hours. When he finally couldn't bring any more prana to bear, Izuku fell back onto the blessedly cold wooden floor. With sweat pouring from his skin in buckets, soaking his shirt, and feeling like he was running a high fever, did she say, "Alright, I think it's time we took a break for lunch." "You're, SLV driver, sensei." He managed to get out in between gasps. This earned him a scoff. "This is nothing compared to what my own teacher, Kwanji Alice, put me through." "You're not finicky, are you? 'Cause I thought we could order in, have a taste of America and all that. Plus, I can't cook to save my life, hehe." She finished giving an awkward laugh while rubbing her head in embarrassment. It was sad but true. Aozaki Aoko, for all her power and magic, couldn't cook. Neither could her former teacher. Thus they often ordered takeout when she lived with her on her hilltop mansion. To this day, she still couldn't even scramble eggs. The only thing she honestly felt confident cooking was black tea. Eating out is good every once in a while, but I don't think I'd want to do it the entire time we're here. We should check the fridge and see what we have to cook around here. If necessary, we can go shopping and pick up a few things. Oi Izu-chan, weren't you listening? I just said I couldn't cook. She leaned over, hands on hips, glaring into her student's eyes. Her glare sent him stuttering, no. I heard you, sensei. But I can cook. Aoko leaned up staring at him dubiously. You can cook? He nodded. You're only 6. Yeah, well, I live alone with my mom. Sometimes she gets sick or has to work late, so I taught myself how to do various things like cooking, cleaning, and the laundry. Mostly so she wouldn't have to worry too much about the house or me after working a long shift. The fifth magician couldn't help but smile upon hearing his honest yet straightforward explanation. He really is a sweetheart. She mused, he'll make a good wife to some lucky girl someday. Smiling, she ruffled his hair, saying, Okay, let's see what we have to eat around this place. A quick rifling through the cupboards revealed that the wizard marshal's idea of food was magically preserved packets of BLD. Sighing and cursing him under her breath, Aoko stated, We'll go shopping, right after we grab a bite to eat. After all, there's nothing worse than going to a grocery store on an empty stomach. Izuku nodded silently, making his way to her as she made her way to the door. The trip to and from the store was uneventful, at least in the eyes of Izuku's, who was used to watching heroes take on villains on a semi-daily basis. For Aoko, however, I can't believe you charged into those muggers like that. Don't scare me like that again, little man. The young boy gave a sheepish chuckle and would have accompanied it with rubbing the back of his head. However, his hands were currently occupied with holding about half a dozen grocery bags. It wasn't that big a deal, Aozaki-sensei. They were just guys with knives, and one had a gun. None of them had any quirks. Even I can handle that. It was true. On their way home, they came across an elderly woman being accosted by 3 men. 2 had switchblades and 1 a cheap .38 special. He didn't hesitate or even think, really. Dropping the bags he was carrying, he dashed towards the trio. He kicked the gun-toting one behind his knee, forcing him down before grabbing his wrist and twisting, forcing him to drop the firearm. He took him out of the fight with a swift kick to the head. The other 2 stood slack-jawed that a kid who looked like he should be in 1st grade just took out their friend. Izuku used this to his advantage. Advancing on the 2 in a burst of speed. He swiped the switchblade out of one man's hand, flipping it closed before bashing him in the nose with it. The sound of cartilage breaking was almost completely drowned out by the thug's scream of pain. He turned to the last one, intent on throwing the closed weapon right in between his eyes, only to turn and see Aoko burying her knee into the gut of the last man, bending him over, eyes widened in pain before he fell limp and boneless. After making sure the woman, May Parker, who fretted over them like she was their own grandmother, was okay, the 2 made their way back to their apartment. Still, you shouldn't be so reckless, little man. Who taught you how to fight like that anyway? She asked, placing her bags on the counter as she did so. I have a couple of teachers back home. One of them teaches his martial art, the other, swordsmanship. Cool, this means we can add sparring to our routine. Izuku blanched, remembering how she took a man out with a single knee strike. Sure, sounds like fun. His response was far from enthusiastic. The two quickly settled into a routine. Izuku would get up a half hour before Ayako, and start on breakfast. Lured by the smell, the fifth magician would rouse from her bed and assist in the cooking, doing small things like chopping ingredients and making black tea for the both of them. After eating, they would do light exercise, before cracking open the tome Mia left for him and studying its contents. Then he would practice what he could, with Ayako giving tips from the sidelines. After lunch, they would spar, which usually resulted in Izuku being thrown into the couch or onto the floor, and Ayako pointing out what he did wrong and how he could improve. Only after dinner was the one time no kind of training took place. The two would watch the news at night. The first night they did so, they made a startling discovery. Heroes. The people they were attempting to rob were considered heroes by the public at large. Tony Stark, owner of Stark Industries and the hero and Avenger known as Iron Man, was giving a speech after his team took down a group of monsters. As you all know, Manhattan was sieged by a large group of monsters a few hours ago. Stark told the press his helmet collapsed into his armor. We can't tell you much at the moment, but we do know that the Baxter building was also assaulted. Are the Fantastic Four all right? Are the children okay? Are the attacks related? A flurry of questions assailed Armored Avenger, yet he merely raised his hands and waited for silence. Once it came, he spoke again. We don't have any information to share with the public at this time. Once we know more, you'll know more. No more questions. The two looked at each other and spoke in unison. We gotta bust them out of jail. Again. You've gotten the hang of the spell, now work on speed. Ayako told her apprentice as he worked on a unique brand of projection they'd found outlined in the journal called tracing. It was a 7-step process that helped the user, through use of structural grasping, better define the makeup of the item they wished to create in their mind's eye. She watched now as Izuku went through the process for what felt like the 1000th time in the past 8 days. Judging the concept of creation. Loss, sacrifice, 2 blades connecting 2 lovers even in death. The originals reached the realm of the gods. They were used to slay a king and thus, were particularly effective against them. Hypothesizing the basic structure. Twin piendao. Heavy curved short swords. One cloudy white, the other tortoiseshell black. Duplicating the composition material. Only the finest of 6 different kinds of metals went into its creation, and blessed spring water from 5 different mountains was used to quench the blades. Imitating the skill of its making. Hammer and tongs, beaten in grief, the wailing of iron only surpassed the lamenting of the smith. Sympathizing with the experience of its growth. One was held by a king, the other used to slay said king in vengeance for the death of the smith by a disloyal assassin who chose to honor the smith's own rage-filled progeny. Reproducing the accumulated years. Forging began in the year 470 BC and was completed in the year 473 BC. Approximate age is 2,522 years from the date of creation. Excelling every manufacturing process. Excelling all manufacturing processes, through use of magecraft and modern steelwork techniques. Trace complete, firing. Trace, on. Lightning sparked from Izuku's hands moments before Kansho and Bakuya, the married twin swords, came into existence. Feeling their weight settle into his palms, he asked, time. 3.5 seconds. Not bad. Ayako commented before adding, but I'd prefer to shave off another 2.5 seconds off your time before we acted. Izuku wanted to disagree with her but was quick to hold his tongue. It had been over a week, and they hadn't heard from anyone who left the house. Meaning they'd all been captured, not just Miram and Tosaka-san. He'd argued with her the first night, wanting to go off and save their friends immediately, but she was against it. She wanted to wait and see if anyone would make it back to the apartment. None of them have, and it didn't sit well with him that they were sitting around doing nothing when who knows what was happening to everyone else. He decided. Tonight, he was going to head out on his own, consequences be damned. His eyes snapped open at just after 2 am. When he went to bed, he dressed in his combat gear. Throwing the blanket off, he went to the window in his room and using reinforcement, removed the screws from the pane, via altering their curvature. Removing the window pane, he took a minute to reinforce his muscles. He had been practicing in his room since he'd heard on the news that Solomon-san had been captured. Izuku knew it was dangerous, practicing magecraft without proper supervision, but he had more at stake than Aoko did at the moment. His aunt was out there somewhere, in who knows what kind of condition. He couldn't just sit by and do nothing anymore. Placing one booted foot on the windowsill, he looked back into his room muttering, "Sorry Aoko-san, but I need to do this." A determined light entering his green eyes, he leaped into the night. A man garbed in a red and blue costume with a black webbing motif trailing down its surface was squatting on top of a gargoyle which he happened to name Bruce. "Man, I tell ya Brucey, old buddy, if something had happened to Aunt May today, I wouldn't have been able to forgive myself. Thankfully, there are still a few decent people in this city. Even if they are tourists." When Aunt May told him how she'd almost been mugged if it hadn't been for the timely intervention of 2 good Samaritans, he was ready to throw on the mask and go hunt them down for some proper old-fashioned street justice. That is until she told him they were already in police custody. Again, his thanks silently went out to a 6-year-old with green hair and his chaperone. As he gazed across the New York skyline, he noticed something odd. A short figure garbed in red and black was haphazardly jumping from roof to roof. His landing was sloppy as if he was someone who had just come into his powers and was testing them out. With everything that happens in this city on a daily basis, he wouldn't be surprised if this was some poor young mutant who'd just come into his mutation. Deciding to help him out lest he hurt himself, Spider-Man shot out a webline and angled himself out onto a nearby rooftop. Landing on a chimney stack, he finally got a good look at the person in question. It was a boy, no older than 6 or 7, with green curly hair wearing a red mantle, and black and silver-lined armor. With a start, Peter realized this was the very same boy who assisted his aunt earlier today. Deciding to make his presence known, he called out, "Hey there, decided to go out for a light jog?" The boy jumped a good 50 feet in the air in fright, flopping around helplessly like a fish before landing on his back. Making his way over, the wall crawler asked, "You okay, kid? I didn't mean to scare you like that." Slowly sitting up and calmly noting the masked hero in front of him like it was an everyday occurrence, he said, "I'm fine, sir, you just startled me." "You don't say, so what are you doing out jumping rooftops at 2:30 in the morning? Isn't it past your bedtime? Isn't it past your curfew?" he retorted, before looking down in embarrassment and saying, "I'm sorry about that, sir. Please forgive me, but I've had a rough week." Instead of getting angry, the masked hero just laughed, "Don't worry about it, kid. Trust me, I've had weeks like that." The webhead leaned back against an AC unit. "So what made your week so terrible that you decided jumping roofs with newly developed powers was a good idea?" The young boy looked at him, judgingly. "I can trust you, right?" "Of course, if you can't trust your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, who can you trust?" he finished by giving 2 thumbs up. "Well," Izuku stopped to breathe on his hands, "it's complicated." Seeing he was cold, the spider-themed hero said, "Sounds like something that needs to be talked about over hot chocolate." "My treat." Again the boy scrutinized his mask as if looking for deception. Finding none, he nodded his assent. "Right then, you don't get motion sick, do you?" "And no, Spider-Man-san." "Why do you ask?" "That was so much fun," Izuku thought. SWNGNG in between the buildings reminded him of that time Tatsumaki had taken him flying. He became sullen at the thought. Only to become more determined to rescue her. Hopefully with Spider-Man's help once he explained the situation. He might also have to ask him about his abilities if he doesn't mind sharing. The building they'd landed in front of was called Max Brenner, a restaurant devoted entirely to hot cocoa and chocolate confectionaries. The interior was all hardwood and wrought iron, from the floor to the furnishings, with a bar up front. Izuku didn't know so many flavors of hot chocolate existed, much less in one place. This place served no less than 8 different types of the warm, sweet drink. As they approached the counter, a built but elderly man greeted them with a smile. "Spidey. Welcome, welcome. And who's this?" "Just a kid looking for a hot drink and a listening ear." "I'm willing to listen, and I know you have the best drinks in town in this weather, Dom." "You're too kind, Webs. What'll you have?" Dom asked, taking out a pen and jotting down his order. "Milk chocolate for me." "Dark chocolate please, sir," Izuku asked. Nodding towards the boy, he said, "Polite that one, could use more that here in the Big Apple." "Your orders'll be right out." Spider-Man reached towards his utility belt. "What do I owe you, Dom?" To which he scoffed and said, "Your money's no good here, hero, not after you saved me from getting robbed last week." The wall-crawling hero's voice took on a surprised lilt as he asked, "Are you sure I can pay? You trying to insult me? Go sit down." The owner grunted, waving him off. He shrugged at his young tagalong before motioning towards a small corner table where they wouldn't be overheard. Sitting across from the boy, he got right down to it. "So, what kind of mess are you in?" Izuku took a deep breath. Letting it out, he gathered his thoughts and then he asked, "Do you recall the giant monsters the Avengers took down a little over a week ago?" "Boy, do I. It was all over the news, the mess was huge and..." Revelation dawned on the hero. "Are you saying you're connected to that somehow?" Izuku was saved from having to answer immediately from their order arriving. He sipped at his drink in silence for a time, and Spider-Man was gracious enough not to prod him for information as he pulled his mask up over his mouth and proceeded to sip at his own drink. Finally, Izuku set his glass aside and said, "It's like this." He told him everything in hushed whispers. Once he was finished, he waited to see what the hero's reaction would be. Spider-Man for his part was flabbergasted. That some of the most influential people on the planet in one form or another were keeping the Infinity Gems a secret, but a rainbow-shooting magic vampire was going around lying to children. That just wasn't cool. He let out a long low whistle. "Wow, you're in deep trouble, kiddo. All this and you decided to sneak out and go on a Rambo rescue mission. You're braver than I am." "Who's Rambo?" Izuku inquired, genuinely confused. Never mind. I'll do whatever I can to help because as far as I'm concerned, the only place those gems belong is inside the sun." Izuku sighed in relief. He was happy to have some backup in the form of a local hero who knew the area and the key players in this upcoming farce. His sigh came out as more of a yawn, and Spider-Man noticed. "But for you, this isn't about the gems, is it? It's about keeping your aunt safe, right?" Izuku hid behind his cup but nodded in response. Peter found himself liking the boy more and more. If he'd been more like him when he received his powers, maybe Uncle Ben. He shook himself. No point in going down that fruitless line of thought. "Okay, first things first, we need a base camp. And I know just where to go." "Where?" Izuku asked, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Xavier's Institute for Kids." All thought of sleep left him for a moment, and Izuku got out, "Are you sure that's a good idea, sir? He's one of the people with the Infinity Gems." "He is, that's true. But that was also the last place your aunt was supposed to end up." "Meaning if she never ended up there?" The wannabe hero understood what he was implying. "Then she's on the blue area of the moon. How are we supposed to get to the moon?" "Let me worry about it if it comes to that. Right now, before we head to Xavier's, we need to pick up something." With that, the red and blue clad hero stood, prompting his charge to follow, but not before the hero slapped a 20 on the table. Once out on the street, Izuku asked, what do we need? A proper bribe. Come on, I'll show ya. Logan smelled him before he saw him. He knew the scent of a Lombardi's all-meat pizza anywhere. The feral man could also make out the smell of chemicals, LTX, and for some reason, iron and ash. Opening up the window to his room, he let in one of the few people he could call a friend. Spider-Man stealthily crawled into the room, extra-large pizza in one hand, a kid stuck to his back via webbing seemingly out cold, and unless he was mistaken, a bottle of Kentucky bourbon attached to his leg. This must be serious if he's bringing me pizza and booze. The small but fierce Canadian noted. What's with the kid, Webbs? He grunted out, releasing one of his claws with a snicket and moving to cut him down from the Webslinger's back. I'll tell you after you cut him down from my back, gently, he said in a whisper. The Wolverine snorted, believe it or not, I know how to handle kids' webhead. With a gentleness he had rarely seen from the man, Spider-Man watched as the usually brutish mutant carefully cut the boy off his back, cradling him in one arm so as not to wake him up before depositing him on his own bed. Seeing the kid was situated, he motioned for his friend to take a seat one of the overstuffed armchairs in his room. Setting the pizza down on the coffee table between the chairs, Spider-Man exclaimed, "Man, I still can't get over how nice these rooms are." The room was larger than an average New York apartment, with wooden floors, a marble fireplace on one wall and whitewashed walls. The bed was a king size, and it had an ensuite bathroom. Several shelves lined the walls and had books on everything from history on the American Civil War to World War II, along with several books on modern police practices and haiku. The books always intrigued Peter, but he never had the chance to ask. Nor would he today, it seems, as Logan flipped open the box of pizza, took a slice, and reiterated, "So, what's up with the kid? Hold on to your tidy witties, 'cause this kid's story is a doozy." This caused the Canadian to pause. How bad we talkin' here, sticky fingers? Possibly Thanos level bad. He proceeded to tell him everything the boy said to him, earning a growl at specific points in the tale. Once he was finished, Logan ripped the booze from his friend's leg, and popping the cork off, took a long swig. After he was done, he offered it to the wallcrawler, who politely declined, saying, "I learned the strong way, not drink and web swing." Logan grunted in supposed laughter. What happened? Not really sure. I just woke up in the morning with a lot of women I know tied up in webbing, not wearing a whole lot else. And apparently, I swing through a couple of skyscrapers at one point. One of which may or may not have been the Daily Bugle, and may or may not have had JJ's underwear hung from a flagpole, all of his underwear. Shut up. I didn't say anything. Logan replied, smirking as he took another drink, so let me get this straight, Chuck and a bunch of other super powerful and not to mention influential people are in possession of the Infinity Gems. The kid was a part of a group sent to steal them without being told he was stealing from heroes. That about right, kid? He didn't pose this question to the red and blue spandex wearing hero sitting across from him but the boy lying on the bed. Sighing before sitting up, Izuku nodded, "Yes sir." Taking a slice of pizza, he handed it to the boy, asking, "What's your name, Cabbage?" It took him a moment to realize he'd just been given a nickname before saying, "Midoriya Izuku, sir." "Ah. Is this your time to the west?" Wolverine asked. It took Izuku a moment to realize the short man in front of him had easily switched from English to flawless Japanese. He couldn't help but respond in his native tongue, "Ah, yes. I find this city to be just as crowded as home, but the people seem to be less considerate." "I must say, you're quite skilled, Logan-san. Did you live in Japan for a time?" A wistful look came over the mutant's face for a moment. "I was gone so quickly," Izuku thought he imagined it, as Logan replied, "Yeah, but that was a long time ago." Suddenly, Logan called out, "You can quit hiding behind the door and come in now." Moments later the door swung inward and a young woman entered. She twice his age, if not a year or so older. She looked to be 13 or so, standing at 4 feet 6 inches with pale skin, long dark hair like strands of black silk and bright green eyes the color of emeralds that played of her Asian features. She was dressed in a white t-shirt that was 2 sizes too big for her. "What are you doing up, Laura?" Logan grunted out. "I smelled pizza." She moved to take a slice only to be stopped by her genetic template/father figure who asked, "How much did you hear?" "Everything." "I don't quite get it though." The female clone replied with a shrug. Sighing, Logan motioned for his daughter to take a slice of pizza before making introductions. "You know the webhead, and this is Midoriya Izuku, a pleasure to meet you, Mississippi." He stuttered out, giving her a polite bow from his place on the bed. She gave the web-slinger a stiff nod, before turning her gaze to the unknown. The boy was young. Very young, but he smelt of iron, ash, and fire to her keen nose. What threw her off more than that was his overly pleasant demeanor. To most she knew, she gave off a loner attitude. Not many wanted to be around her. It took months of pestering by Logan and constant nagging from her dorm mates before she finally managed to open up to them. With him though, her cold exterior didn't seem to faze him in the slightest. He just lay there smiling at her. On top of all this, she had been called many things in life. Weapon, freak, monster, even a were. But he called her Mississippi. He was very polite to someone like her. She just couldn't wrap her head around it. "Laura Kinney." She returned the bow with one of her own before sitting on the edge of the bed, close enough to silently confer acceptance, but far enough away to give him his space and her hers. Logan hid a grin as Laura sat down, glad she was warming up to people and being more relaxed. Then he got serious. "I hope it goes without saying you're not supposed to mention this to anyone. Much less even think about it around the professor or Red." "Obviously." "What's the plan?" Laura asked, taking a bite of cheesy meat-loaded goodness. "You and the kid are gonna go back to bed, Webbs and I are gonna come up with a plan." "But sir," Izuku tried to object, only for Logan to effectively cut him off by unleashing his claws. "But nothing, kid. You're in deep enough already. You don't need to stick your neck out any further." Izuku found his eyes fixed on the metal claws coming out of Logan's hands. These claws killed their owner's father, fought in both the American Civil War and both World Wars, and had seen love and loss through the ages. Initially, they were of bone before being coated in nigh unbreakable adamantium. The only thing protecting their owner from adamantium poisoning was his regenerative healing factor. Swords. Bone swords. Izuku thought to himself in awe. "Oi kid, you okay?" Logan grunted out. Shaking himself out of his funk, Izuku told the venerable old mutant, "With all due respect, it's not your family who's missing." Izuku glared, doing his best to suppress a yawn. Logan huffed, "You got me there, kid, but would she want you gettin' hurt tryin' to save her?" Seeing him sufficiently cowed with that comment, Weapon X turned to his clone and said, "Take the kid, the pizza, and go back to bed. Webbs and I'll come up with a plan by morning." Seeing the frown and accompanying glare she was giving him, he said with a bit of force, "Go, Laura." Releasing a growl from the back of her throat, Laura took the grease-laden box in one hand, Izuku's hand in the other, and led him from the room. After they were gone, Spider-Man said to his friend, "Was that really necessary, Logan?" Lighting a cigar, the vicious Canadian replied, "If that kid doesn't keep his head down, someone's gonna cut it off, Webbs. It's for his own good." While the hero in him agreed, the part that was a nephew vehemently disagreed. He kept that to himself, however, as he knew that Izuku was far from ready to go up against the likes of those that compromised those who held the Infinity Gems. Instead, he asked, "So what's the plan?" After being dragged down a hallway, Izuku gathered enough nerve to ask, "Where are we going, Keikini-san?" "Laura." She stopped, glancing backward to give him a look. "Call me Laura. No need to be so formal here in America." She continued walking, saying, "We're heading back to the room I share with a couple other girls. The pizza is supposed to be a peace offering, I think." She stopped in front of a door that had a nameplate with her name along with two other girls. Letting go of his hand, Laura twisted the knob and let the door swing inward. From what he could see from the doorway was a large room with a window seat, with two large beds on either side of the room, each had a dresser. The bed on the left had posters of cats were on one wall, while the one on the right sported the images of computer geniuses like Bill Gates and Charles Babbage on the other. Two older women sitting on either bed. The older of the two had light brown hair pulled up into a ponytail, her pale complexion was lit by the light of a laptop computer. Hazel eyes looked up curiously as Laura entered the room. "Hey Laura, where'd the pizza come from? And who's that behind you?" The second question was posed by the second girl. She had pale blonde hair that was so light in the shade it was almost white. Her bright blue eyes sparkled with curiosity as she held a stuffed blue creature to her chest. Both girls were wearing pajamas, something he was thankful for as he poked his head out from behind Laura. The former assassin spoke for the younger boy, "This is Izukumidoriya. He's in trouble. He'll be spending the night here while Logan figures something out. The pizza is a peace offering." Aw. The two got up and cooed when they got a good look at the young boy hiding behind their quite introverted roommate. Laura superimposed herself in between them and said, "Don't crowd him, you're scaring him." The two blinked owlishly before the older of the two crouched down to his eye level and said, "Hi there little guy, my name's Kitty. You're Izuku, right?" "Yes, miss." Bleary-eyed as he was, Izuku still managed to be polite. The X-Men found herself amused. "Well, aren't you polite? This is Ileana, but we all just call her Ilia." "Hi, there cutie," Ileana said, bending down to his level. "What kind of trouble are you in?" "The bad kind, I don't really want to talk about it," he said, suppressing a yawn. Kitty nodded sympathetically. "That's fine. You look beat. Why don't you go lay down in my bed, okay?" Izuku accepted without protest, all but collapsing onto the mattress without even bothering to uncover the blankets. He was out like a light moments later. Once the trio of mutants had gathered onto Magic's bed, Kitty turned to Laura and all but demanded, "All right, spill. What do you mean?" "You know DMN well what she means, Laura. What's going on with that boy?" Ileana asked. Frowning, the pharaoh replied, "Logan asked me not to tell. To not even think about it around the professor or Jean." "Then it's serious?" Seeing her friend nod, Ilia continued, "You can tell us, I can't be mind-read and neither can Tabby." "It's true," the older girl affirmed, "our powers make it impossible." "Well, Logan did tell me to trust people more." Laura reasoned, "Okay, this is what's going on." By the time she was finished, the other two were staring at her and the sleeping boy, both making their best fish impression. Kitty found her voice first. "You're kidding, right?" "Yeah, you know me, I'm just a regular joker," Laura said, tone flat and straight-faced. "Heh, sorry I asked." Ileana put the conversation back on track, "But what are we going to do about all this?" Laura looked over at the sleeping figure before telling her friends, "You two don't have to do anything, but I'm going to help him find his aunt." It seems that this night was full of surprises for the two mutants concerning their friend. Why? That's because, I know what it's like to lose family. As Laura said this, she gripped her arms, releasing her claws into her shoulders. The pain was a release to her. She understood pain. She was subjected to it all the time at the facility growing up. Whenever she successfully assassinated a target, Kimura beat her. Her claws were ripped from her body without anesthesia and coated in adamantium before being forced back into her hands. Yes, she was used to pain. "Laura." Kitty pulled her hands away from her arms while the magic-wielding mutant uttered a quick healing spell even though it wasn't necessary. "I thought you were getting better." Magic asked sorrowfully. The reason Laura bunked with both Ileana Rasputina and Catherine, Kitty, Pride was that they understood. Each had gone through their own trials and tribulations. Ileana had quite literally spent a decade in a hell dimension known as Limbo, and Kitty had been possessed. Forced to believe she was the daughter of, and fight the X-Men by one of Logan's former foes, Shogun. I was just strong to see someone in a similar position to mine, and then finding out the professor can't really be trusted. This place with all of you was the closest I've ever felt at home since my mother died, yet I can't help but feel it slipping away. She wanted to cut again, to relieve stress and let out the internal pain. But she held back because a creak came from the bed on the other side of the room. She glanced over to see Izuku tossing and turning in his sleep. Getting a grip, the second best at what she does, asked, "Will you help me help him?" "Like totally." Shadowcat replied, immediately giving a peace sign, "Besides, we totes owe him for the pizza. You obviously can't do this all on your own, and if we don't go with you, we'll just worry, so of course, we're coming." Ileana told her. "Thank you," Laura said, genuinely grateful for their help. She endured the hug the other two brought her into before saying, "We should get some sleep. Big day tomorrow." When Izuku awoke, he was confused for a little bit, until it all came back to him. Throwing off the sheets, Izuku quickly made the bed before creeping out of the room, leaving the girls to their rest. The moment he shut the door behind him, he bumped into someone. Looking up, he found himself in front of a group of blonde-haired, blue-eyed quintuplet girls. "Who's this?" the one in the middle said. "I don't know, said the one on the immediate right. "He's sneaking out of Kinney, Rasputina's, and Pride's room, the one on the left noted. "Highly suspect." The one on the far right added, eyebrows narrowed in suspicion, grinning maliciously. "Very suspicious." The last on the far left finished, a smirk adorning her face as well. Bowing politely, Izuku said, "I'm sorry, I wasn't looking where I was going." It went without saying that the Stepford Cuckoos found this strange young gentleman in front of them to be absolutely adorable. But they were curious as to how he got here in the first place. "What brings you to Xavier Institute?" Sophie, the leader of the Cuckoos, asked. Where I come from, it's rude to ask someone questions without introducing yourself first." "I'm Midoriya Izuku, and you are?" The Cuckoos blinked. They could confer much from just his name and mannerisms. "I'm Sophie, these are my sisters Celeste, Mindy, Phoebe, and Esme. We're the Cuckoo sisters." As she spoke, her sisters were attempting to read his mind. Esme reached out, trying to understand his thoughts, to learn his motives, only to feel her mind get bombarded by what felt like thousands of blades, causing her to reel back in shock. Seeing her under duress, Izuku asked, "Are you alright, Mindy-san? You look unwell." Surprised, he not only remembered her name but addressed her as an individual. Mindy told him, "I'm fine, thank you." "You remembered her name?" One of the others, Phoebe, noted. Cocking his head to the side, Izuku noted, "Yes, your sister took the time to introduce you, so why wouldn't I?" "It's nothing, it's just that." Mindy fell silent. "What my dear sister is trying to say is, we are often treated as part of a set. When people talk to us, they refer to us as the Stepford Cuckoos or the 5-in-1. We are rarely if ever seen as individuals but rather, part of a collective whole. I am usually the spokesperson for the group." Sophie explained. Izuku looked perturbed at the very thought, but your people. You each have your own thoughts, feelings, names, likes, and dislikes. You're each your own person. Sophie smiled down at him sadly. "Most people who meet us don't see us like that, Izuku." "That's wrong," he said, shaking his head, still trying to wrap his head around such a concept. He lived in a world of quirks, where people with bird heads, wings, strange colored skin, and other things are seen as usual in his time. For a quintet of normal-looking girls to be ostracized just because they looked alike was dumb to him. "Thank you, you're sweet for saying so," Esme told him, before asking, "But really, why are you here?" He froze. He didn't want to lie to them, not after they opened up to him like this, but he didn't want to risk his knowing about the Infinity Gems getting back to Xavier. I am sorry, but I can't tell you. Seeing him freeze like a deer in headlights, the 5-in-1 shared their thoughts with one another. Is he up to something? Could he want something like information from the institute? Maybe Cerebra. Could be Sophie, but he doesn't want to tell us, and we can't get into his head. It's impossible. Celeste told her. He seems far too kind not to mention young want to hurt anyone. I say we ask him. All in agreement? Esme motioned. A chorus of eyes rang out in Sophie's head, prompting her to ask, "Are you up to something dangerous, Izuku?" He hesitated before finally nodding. Could you get hurt? Another nod. And you don't want to tell us more because we could get hurt? Yet another nod, this one more rapid than those previous. Sophie pondered her next set of questions carefully. Does it have something to do with the X-Men? Seeing the clueless look she was getting, only for a bulb to go off in his eyes, he shook his head. Okay, so he knows who the X-Men are, but they aren't involved, at least directly. Is it something at the school? A nod. Something to do with Xavier? Another nod. Cerebra? Sophie guessed. What? It was the first word Izuku had spoken in a while, and he apparently sounded confused. Sophie hummed in thought. Try as she might, neither she nor her sisters could think of anything Xavier alone had that he would be sent after. He's been sent after an infinity gem. Both the Cuckoos and Izuku turned to see Laura standing in the doorway, arms crossed and glaring at the 5-in-1. The quintet paled at the thought of someone like Xavier having something of that magnitude in his possession. Before any of them could say anything, Laura ushered them into the room saying, "Not out in the hall, you've asked too much already." Moving inside, they were promptly met by an angered Magic and Shadowcat. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't have Magic send you somewhere and leave you there. We can help you get the Infinity Gem. God, I can't believe the professor would. Which one does he have?" All eyes turned to Izuku upon the asking of this question. "The Mind Gem. The most powerful telepath on the planet, has the gem that lets him control people's minds. Seems kinda redundant if you ask me, dude." Kitty noted. Celeste threw in her 2 cents, not really. If he were powerful enough not to need the Mind Gem, he wouldn't need Cerebra to find mutants. In fact, someone like him with the Mind Gem is horrifying. While he is no Magneto, he could, if he so desired, force people to accept mutants as equals by messing with their minds. Like, I don't think the professor would do that, Sophie. That's Celeste. Sophie is on her left. Izuku corrected, earning him a smile and a nod from the cuckoo. Shadowcat rolled her eyes and shrugged, like whatifs, they all look alike, dude. You not being very nice, Kitty, Izuku noted with a frown. Noting that, okay, little dude, what's your hang-up? I don't like people who treat others differently just because they're different. Isn't that the whole point of this school? To promote acceptance? Well, how can it do that if even the students are biased towards each other? This goes deeper than just the step forwards. What's wrong, Izuku? Magic asked. Sighing, Izuku decided to open up. I come from a different dimension entirely. One where people with quirks, what you would call mutations, are the DMN people in society. A bombshell was dropped, and you could hear a pin drop. Whoa, like really? Seeing him nod, Kitty said wistfully, sounds like paradise. It is. He paused to gather his courage, if you're part of the 80% of the population who are born with a quirk. If not, you don't get treated so great. Laura was the first to piece together what he was implying. You were one of the 20% born without a quirk, weren't you, Izuku? He gave a bitter smile. Yeah, I am. I wasn't treated too badly till I turned 4, which is when quirks usually manifest at the latest. When that didn't happen, well, my best friend became my bully, and saw fit to belittle me and use his explosion generation quirk on me any chance he could. Shadowcat covered her mouth as she gasped, while Laura released her hand and foot claws with a snicket. But the teacher's dash. Izuku's reply was flat, didn't care. To them, I was quirkless, and thus, not human. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, just treat each other nicely, regardless of how they look or whatever. It's just better for everyone that way. He finished by giving them all a big warm smile. Kitty knew when she'd been beat, and there was no defying that smile. Okay, I'm not saying it'll happen right away or overnight, but I'll try. Like, what are your girls' names again? As new bonds formed in the girls' dorm, a plan was being enacted by two old friends. Spider-Man was crawling on the ceiling above Wolverine as he stalked his way toward Xavier's office. You. Sure, this is a good idea, Biff? Don't call me Biff, Webbs. But you call me Webbs, so why can't I dash? Can it, Bub? And yes, I'm sure this a good idea. Spider-Man sighed behind his mask. So you think it's a good idea to confront the world's most powerful telepath about the fact he has an infinity gem, which lets him control minds? Yeah, how could this possibly go wrong? Wolverine growled in his throat and was prepared to push open the oaken doors when he smelled someone familiar. Someone who always meant trouble whenever he showed up. Cable, Wolverine growled before forcing the door open. He found the rest of the X-Men including Xavier was in the middle of a conference with the time-traveling mutant. He stood more than a foot above Wolverine in height at 6 feet 8 inches to his smaller 5 feet 0 inches frame. His build was thick and corded with muscle, right arm and eye had been robotized by the techno-organic virus. His hair was shock white and short, and as usual, kitted out for war. Body armor with crisscrossing bandoliers held everything from grenades to futuristic weaponry. He had 2 rifles slung over his back and had a spear with a jagged purple crystal as the spearhead in his still human hand. The rough jeans he was wearing housed 2 holstered pistols and the boots on his feet had 2 knives tucked away. Clenching his fists, and smelling trouble, Logan addressed the room. I wasn't aware there was a staff meeting. Funny, must not be gotten the memo. So, what did I miss? That's because this meeting concerned you, Cyclops said blunt as always when it came to the feral. A long low growl reverberated from the alpha feral's throat. Oh, is that so, bub? Tell me, what I did that warranted a DMN tribunal. Logan, please, let us explain. Jean implored. If there was one person who could get him to calm down and listen, it was her. He knew it, and so did she. Leaning against the doorframe, he ground out, this better be good red. Xavier fingers steepled behind his desk spoke, you might as well come in Spider-Man, as this concerns you as well. The wall crawler entered with a flourish doing a front flip smoothly landing on all fours before standing, how are my favorite ex-people? Cable. Cable spoke for the first time since Wolverine entered the room, sending a respect-filled nod in the direction of the web-slinger, Spider-Man. Professor, are you sure he should be here? This is a mutant problem. Scott opined. Xavier waved off his star pupil's concern, this news may have been brought to us by Cable, but by no means is it a mutant problem, Scott. In fact, I value his insight into this matter. Spider-Man quickly caught on to what the wheelchair-bound mutant was referring to. You're talking about the kid, aren't you? Cable took control of the floor, indeed. If he isn't contained or killed, he'll destroy the planet. Both animal-themed heroes looked at one another in utter confusion before they burst out laughing, and Spider-Man was the first to get a word in through his chuckles, you're kidding, right? This kid, who's all of 6, by the way, doesn't even have full control of what little power he has. You're telling us he's planet-killing level? Cable, I love you like a brother, man, but I think all that time travel is finally messing with your head. No kidding, Wolverine added, kid has no reason to want to destroy the planet even if he could. He's too nice to even consider such a thing. Cable was unmoved by their assessment of Izuku's character, I just came from a ruined future. If that child is not contained, the world as you know it will be destroyed. Hands on his waist, Spider-Man said, Cable, have you ever thought that you coming back and warning us about this kid destroying the world is a self-fulfilling prophecy? Cable's stark white eyebrows rose up to his hairline. He rubbed his jawline with his metallic thumb and forefinger, it's possible. He admitted at length, but not a chance we can take. Xavier spoke up, in any case, the point is moot. I've sent Colossus and Rogue to collect the boy. When it comes to a potentially world-ending threat, one cannot be too careful. You what? Both heroes yelled even as the office doors slammed shut behind them. Cyclops stepped up, his visor glowing a menacing red. As for you two, for the good of both mutant and humankind, we're going to have to insist you stand down. Please? Jean asked nicely. Spider-Man moved quicker than the rest, firing webbing into Cyclops' visor. Yeah, how about no? Wolverine charged into the fray, claws mere seconds away from being freed from his flesh as he yelled, "This is all your fault, Chuck. If you didn't have that DMN Infinity Gem, the kid wouldn't even need to be here in the first place." It was like he was Al Baba saying, "Open sesame." Everyone froze except Logan and Spider-Man, allowing the two to successfully gain the upper hand. Logan's spear tackled both Beast and Cable, punching them both in the chin as strong as humanly could, before flipping to his feet and delivering a body blow to Jean's stomach strong enough to bend her over his fist. "Sorry, Red," he whispered into her ear moments before everything faded to black. Spider-Man meanwhile, had taken to slapping the heads of Emma Frost and Cyclops together, preventing either of them from using their powers due to either their close proximity to each other or pain. He then webbed the two together, leaving them on the floor. The only person left standing was Storm, who the two turned to at the same time. Much to their surprise, the Weather Witch raised her hands in supplication and surrender. "I have no intention of fighting either of you nor allowing a child to come to harm." Ororo turned to Xavier then, "Now what is this about an Infinity Stone, Professor?" Xavier knew when he'd been beaten. The only way this could be hidden now is if he forcibly wiped everyone's memories, and he was many things, but he refused to go so far as Eric. "I do have an Infinity Gem, the Mind Gem to be precise." "Charles, what on earth were you thinking, keeping something like that here at the school? What if one of the students had gotten a hold of it? What if someone found out you had it and tried to go to any lengths to get it?" Ororo chastised the older man. Sighing, he silently weathered her verbal assault, knowing he deserved every word of it. "Funny you should say that, Ro, as the kid he's so worried about. He's part of a band of thieves who come from a different dimension looking for those darn rocks," Wolverine informed her. Ororo had trouble believing what she heard. "He is, and you're still willing to defend him, Logan? Izuku doesn't care about the stones. He just wants to find his aunt and his friends, and leave. According to him, besides not knowing if his friends are even alive, the second worst thing about all this is that he's missed 3 months of school back home. Apparently all because he's been here for little over a week. Something about parallel universal timescale." The wallcrawler supplied, sounding fascinated by the subject of multiversal time dilation. "He's Japanese, they take their schooling very seriously over there." As the byplay continued, Charles Xavier pondered. A child from another universe roped into stealing stones of immense power. A child who wants nothing to do with the power at all, and merely wishes to find his family and return home. Yet the dire warnings of Cable still rang in his head. If the boy were not captured, he would ruin the very planet. But, could Spider-Man's thesis prove true? What if the very act of Cable returning to the past to stop the events that doomed the future to happen, caused it in the first place? Xavier was at a loss for what to do. He did not want a child to come to harm, but with the fate of the world hanging in the balance, billions of lives compared to one, what choice did he really have? "I am so sorry, Logan," Spider-Man. The mutant who was the best at what he does was confused. Sorry for what, Chuck?" Spider-Man did a quick head count. Biff, where'd Cable go?" Seeing the would-be child killer was no longer in the room, Wolverine lashed out at Xavier, striking him in the jaw and lay him out cold. Turning to Storm, he said, "Ro, find the Infinity Gem, webs, and I gotta get that kid outta here." With that, Wolverine and Spider-Man raced off, with the spandex-wearing hero yelling, "Right behind you, Biff. Don't call me Biff." His admittance of being from a mutation-heavy dimension led to many more questions on the girls' parts. Questions he happily answered. They particularly liked the idea of heroism being an applicable job choice. Eventually, they came back to the reason he was here in the first place. When they questioned why he would want to steal the infinity gems from this dimension's heroes, a profession he looked up to all his life, his response was telling. I was lied to. This man Zelrich, he asked for my help, and I didn't feel right telling him no, not after he helped me. I don't even care about the DMN gems anymore. I just want to know if my friends and aunt are alive. If they are, I want to know where they are so I can get them back and go home. He was tearing up a little at the end, and Kitty offered him a tissue while Sophie patted him on the back saying reassuringly, "It'll be okay, little guy." I wish that were true. Deciding to try his luck, he asked, "None of you saw a short woman with green curly hair around here within the last week, did you?" Receiving a massive nose, the third-rate Magus head slumped in dejection. Then that means she probably lost to Black Bolt. How am I supposed to get to the moon? Let us help you, Laura said. Izuku was shocked, to say the least. Why, you can't do that, Laura-san, you could get in trouble. Putting a hand on his shoulder, causing him to look her in the eye, Laura told him, Izuku, we are mutants. A good portion of the world already hates us because of what we are. Some mutants, like Magneto, are supremacists. Things can't get much worse for us than they already are. The boy frowned, muttering, I don't want anyone getting hurt because of me though. I have a healing factor, Kitty can phase through just about anything, and Ileana can magically heal wounds. We'll be fine. Don't forget about us, right girls? Sophie questioned her sisters, who nodded emphatically. We can simply stop the fighting altogether. Kitty raised an eyebrow, like, you sure you want to get involved? Frost might not take too kindly to this, you know. Esme smiled wickedly, replying, we're tired of the whole Frost's pets persona. Time to leave the nest, as it were. Kitty, being the eldest of the bunch, decided to be the voice of reason. I'm like, all for teenage rebellion, but where do we start looking for these people? Any ideas? After a long PRGN pause, Laura spoke up, S.H.I.E.L.D., they might be held at S.H.I.E.L.D. Oh yeah, they came for you that one time. Kitty noted. The door was suddenly smashed to splinters, and a man made entirely of steel stepped into the room, saying, I'm afraid no one is going anywhere. Izuku immediately structurally analyzed the man. His skin seemed to have turned into some sort of organic carbon metal alloy. But it wasn't just his skin. His muscles, bones, organs, his entire body was either coated or converted into this substance. Ileana stood staring the metal man down. Just what is the meaning of this, Pyotr? Ileana, step aside. The professor has decreed that boy is dangerous, and is to be apprehended. That goes for the rest of you as well. He added, looking to the 5-in-1, Shadowcat, and Talon. When Laura stepped forward, unsheathing her claws with a snicket, a voice with a Cajun drawl called out, Easy there, Suga, no one needs to get hurt. The kid just needs to come with us real quiet like. Rouge, Laura growled out. A curvaceous woman looked to be in her early 20s with a white streak in her curly red hair, wearing a yellow and green bodysuit with a green jacket over it, and yellow LTHR gloves over her hands, walked into the room. Her lips were covered in red lipstick, and she smiled as if amused at the defensive formation the girls had taken around the little boy. Don't want to hurt anyone now. Why don't y'all just step aside, yeah? Rogue asked, hoping to end this peacefully. Laura checked her peripheral vision. No one was hesitating for even an instant. Good. Not happening. Laura-san, it's okay, Izuku said this as he stepped out from behind her. The former assassin got a firm grip on his shoulder and all but hissed out, no. Patting her wrist and being careful not to cut himself on her bone blades, Izuku told her, it'll be okay. I don't want you fighting your friends. He paused and glanced at Ileana, your family, for my sake. He looked a rogue and smiled before taking a single step forward. The hammer was already cocked in his mind, He would not allow his new friends to lose their home and friends because of their longing to help him with his troubles. So he would leave. He had a lead. He just needed to find this shield organization, and he could go from there. But first, he had to get away from here. Trace, on. Lightning cascaded around his form when it cleared. Izuku was standing there. Any kind of visible flesh including his curly locks were now the color of highly polished chrome. Ilyana was quick to realize what he'd done, Pyotr's mutation, but how? But he wasn't done yet. With a bestial howl, the 6-year-old released 3 metal claws from in between the knuckles of his hands, and 1 more came out of each boot, right between his big and middle toes. In an instant, he had copied Colossus' metal body and both Logan's and Laura's metal claws. But, he had miscalculated. By tracing the bone claws of both Logan and Laura, he was being led on by their collective memories instead of being in control himself. His mind had checked out, and his body was essentially along for the ride in this fight. Thus he launched himself at the two like a savage animal. The usual smiling and polite boy rammed his now bladed fists into each of their stomachs, sending the 3 of them careening out of the room and through the wall before tumbling down onto the front lawn. With a snarl befitting a vicious animal, Izuku wrenched his fist free from Rogue's stomach, drawing forth 3 bloodied claws. As he prepared to sweep said claws down over her throat, ending one of his immediate threats, he was sent flying by a fist to the face. He dug all 8 bone claws into the earth, digging up small trenches as he did so. Colossus stood protectively over Rogue, who was keeping the pressure on her bloodstained stomach. The professor was right to be concerned. You are dangerous. In response, Izuku's body loped forward on all 4s, slavering like a hungry wolf. Pyotr rushed forward to meet him with his fist cocked back. Right, when he threw his punch, Izuku slid forward between the brawler's legs, before digging his claws into the earth and using his momentum to spin around and leaping onto the steel fighter's back. Wrapping his legs around his waist, he proceeded to stab him repeatedly in the back, aiming for natural weak points like his kidneys, spine, and the end of his neck. Colossus thrashed and raged, fruitlessly reaching for the rabid boy who now clung to his back. Finally, the iron brawler slammed himself bodily into the lawn, backside first. The first blow stunned the feral boy, the second loosened his grip, the third finally made him lose his grip and lay in a crater in the earth. Colossus picked the boy up by the scruff of his armor, getting a good look at him. His metallic skin already had cracks in it. Like an old clay pot, or a porcelain vase that someone had tried to glue back together, pieces of metal broke off his body before dissolving into motes of light. Seeing the boy let out a groan, Colossus remarked, "Regained your wits, have you? What happened?" Instead of answering, Pyotr looked over to Rogue, who had managed to get inside thanks to the aid of the students. But a puddle of blood remained. The metallic Russian drew back his fist, intending to render the boy unconscious. "Hands off the kid." Colossus didn't even have time to turn before he was kicked in the head and sent flying through Xavier's mansion. Walls of wood, plaster, and steel giving way under his weight. Izuku flopped to the ground in a boneless heap but managed to open his eyes and stare up at his rescuer. "Aozaki-sensei," he asked weakly as even more metal fell off his face. The 5th magician stood before him, her face a visage of fury. Both her arms and legs were burning with blue-tinged magical energy like rocket engines, and a thrumming filled the air as her magic circuits were going full blast. Without even bothering to reply, scooped him up in her arms and did her best to crush the life out of him, all while berating him. "You stupid, stupid, boy. Do you have any idea how worried I was about you? Gone, no note, nothing. I spent hours trying to find you. If it weren't for the king of rats, I probably wouldn't have. Honestly, what were you thinking?" She held him at arm's length then, giving him a once-over. Allowing him to finally see the little white-furred rat on her shoulder with the red cape across his neck and a tiny crown perched in between his ears. "Well?" Izuku's attention was brought back to the irate magician, to whom he replied, "I was thinking about my aunt." The redhead's anger seemed to deflate. I know. I get it, okay. You're worried about your family. But you can't just go out in the middle of the night, untrained, and hope to become a one-man rescue team. You need more information, you need a plan. I know, you're right, I'm sorry. And another thing, wait, what? Aoko asked. Izuku took a breath and tried again. You were right. I should have got more information and trained more before running off first. But, it's not wrong wanting to save people who are in danger. I refuse to believe it's wrong. Sorry, but that's just how I feel. Aoko didn't know whether to pull her hair out or squish the boy in front of her via a hug. You're right, it's not my family in danger. I don't know how it feels. You're also not wrong in wanting to help people in trouble. Life is valuable, we only get one, and people often forget that. But Izuku dash. Aoko had to stop the explanation to stop 2 bullets in midair from striking her charge right in the back of the head. Glaring at the interloper, a soldier with a metal left arm and cropped white hair, she said, do you freaking mind? We're having a moment here. In response to his sneak attack failing, Cable body slid right behind the magician, intending to stab her in the head with one of his boot knives, his scimitar poised to gouge out the boy's heart. He struck with the speed of a cheetah and the precision of a snake, impaling both of his targets at the same time. Thank goodness, now the future is safe. But the Akari-san's relief came far too soon. For before his eyes both bodies seemed to molt out of both their skin and clothes, leaving them both unharmed. Placing Izuku down on the lawn, Aoko, now with a grimace on her face, told her charge, wait right here little man, I'll be right back. Then we can go look for everyone else. Aoko calmly took in the mercenary before her. He had guns, knives, and grenades. Yet the only thing that worried her was that crystal spear of his. Not taking her eyes off that man, she yelled over her shoulder, Oi, Izuku-kun. What can you tell me about his spear? Izuku, who was now surrounded by his new mutant friends and other students who had gathered on the lawn. Not that the boy took notice at the moment. But he had no choice in the matter when one student decided to start something with him. Said student was a pale boy with glasses and his dark hair shaved on the sides and swept back on top, wearing a red and black striped shirt. Nudged Izuku with his foot, saying rudely, what are you doing here? Xavier's isn't a place for your kind. Did you attack Colossus? Not waiting for a response, the boy sneered and replied, you did, didn't you? You people really should be taught your place. I thought your kind would have learned after Jimbo was avenged, but I guess not. Sophie and the other cuckoos were surrounding him in seconds. Back off, Quentin. He's with us. My name is Kid Omega. The boy seethed. Kid Omega looked at the boy they were crowding protectively around, then said to his fellow mutants, I can't believe it, tell me it isn't true. That you're protecting this human. You DMN race traitors. Sophie, who had been creepily stalked by Quentin Quire for a while, had finally lost her cool. Firstly, Quentin, that's the exact opposite of Xavier's message. You might as well leave and join Magneto. As for being race traitors, we don't care. Celeste picked up where Sophie left off. Now, PSS off Esme continued. Before we make you. Phoebe finished. Midi added after the others were done, and take your gang with you. Magic, Talon, and Shadowcat came to stand next to the quintuplets, with Talon adding her own threat, and if you think about threatening him again. Snick it. Let's go. He said to his identically dressed Omega gang. The girls turned to tell their little friend not to worry about Quentin, only to find him not paying the altercation any attention at all. Instead, he was staring at Cable, more specifically his spear as it was pointed dangerously in his mentor's direction. That spear, the scimitar, was made utilizing 39th century forging techniques and technology. Its purpose was to amplify and direct the psychic energies of the user. It had been sent back to ancient Greece from the future where it would be placed in the hands of a statue to await its wielder for centuries to pick it up in the present. But what really drew the boy's gaze was the arm of the man which held the spear. A virus that turned flesh into metal, the organic brain into a supercomputer, and eyes into inferred cameras. The techno-organic virus. He didn't mean to do it, he really didn't. But subconsciously he viewed Cable's metal-coated arm as armor, and he began to trace. Liquid metal flowed across his right arm all the way from his shoulder down to his fingertips. He reached out with his mind and clenched his fist. Cable, who was just able to avoid Aoko's strikes by body sliding, before poking at her with his scimitar, was suddenly lifted into the air, gripping his throat. His gaze quickly fixed on the boy. I knew it. He is dangerous. Still, in a trance-like state, the boy gathered electricity in his palm, before he flicked his hand outward, sending the time traveler flying over the horizon until he eventually crashed into the Hudson River. Aoko turned to the assembled students, ready to thank one of them for the assist when she noticed Izuku writhing on the ground. She was by his side in under a second. His arm was covered with the same metal as the man she was just squaring off against moment prior. Izuku? Izuku, can you hear me? Kid? But Izuku was far away at the moment. He was on a hill with weapons impaled on its top. Metal bone claws and steel skin lay embedded in the dust, as a metallic sludge attempted to consume him whole. It crept along his form like a rapidly spreading fungus. He could feel it seeping into his flesh, bones, and nerves. The metallic virus was rapidly converging on his mouth, seeking to drown him. His eyes roved around in his sockets, wildly looking for something to save him on this desolate hill. They landed on the bone claws, and the steel skin as the virus spread across his face. In what he felt was his final moment, he had an epiphany: I am the bone of my sword. Steel is my body. Just as the virus reached the edge of his mouth, it stopped. He couldn't move, it had him dead to rights, yet it refused to take that final step and send itself down his gullet, liquefying his internal organs. Instead, a chrome-colored tendril snaked its way up to his eye level, a red orb that was bright crimson in the center and black around the edges peered back at him like an unblinking eye. A bubbling mass of liquid metal frothed up and soon took the shape of a simple speaker. Moments after this, a voice came through, sounding flat, monotone, mechanical, and ever so slightly masculine. You claim to be steel. Metal? But you, a weak carbon-based fleshy organism. Thus, you are not steel. Your rebuttal. Izuku peered at this strange thing that was holding him hostage on a hill of dirt. Seeing it had sentience, he tried to reason with it, first by getting to know it. What is your name? It's rude to ask questions without introducing yourself first. The eye cocked itself to the side as if observing him and weighing his response. Acknowledged. This one is known as Techno-Organic Virus Halcyon Strain, version M². Your designation: flesh organism. A virus capable of turning organic matter into metal. I'm in trouble. The best thing he could think to do was to keep it talking, so he replied, Midoriya Izuku. The tendril dipped slightly, possibly in greeting. Acknowledged. Now, as to my inquiry. What makes you, a fleshy, carbon-based organism, think you are of steel? Izuku used its only logic against the virus. It's because I'm a carbon organism that I can say that I am steel. Iron without carbon in it isn't steel, it's just iron. Since I have carbon, I am steel. I am the bone of my sword. Steel is my body. Halcyon made a whirring noise like a computer that was having trouble processing something for a moment before the light in its eye dimmed briefly before coming back online. Your statement is illogical. Though you are a carbon-based organism, you are not steel, not yet. You are a walking water sack. Too weak, and too fragile to be called steel. Prepare to be assimilated. Can't we talk about this and come to some kind of agreement? Izuku asked. I'm sorry, but I can't do that, Midoriya Izuku. Goodbye. Halcyon said as the metallic ooze began to creep over and through his lips, no matter how strong he pressed them together. Then he saw it on the horizon, a flash of blue-white light that quickly encroached upon the hill on which he knelt. The eye turned to stare at the oncoming nova. Illogical. The sentient virus said moments before it, and its captive were consumed in blinding light. Izuku's eyes shot open with a gasp. He tried to sit up, only to find a couple pair of hands on his shoulders forcing him down. Looking around wildly, his gaze fixed on both Aoko and Sophie holding him down. Aoko with a look of relief on her face told him, "Easy little man, easy. Yeah, you're going to be okay. Just relax and try not to freak out." The cuckoo told him. He looked around trying to figure out why he would freak out. There was a sword handle in his chst. The handle was soft LTHR, the guard of twisted iron ending in 3 talons on either side, while circular the pommel topped with a sparkling star sapphire. What little he could see of the blade, he could tell it was silver in make. Its history and forging process flowed into him at a glance. Forged in the depths of limbo, utilizing a shard of its wielder's soul, white magic, and in the name of vengeance and freedom. With it, liberty and rulership of limbo were attained. It was now a symbol. The one who held the blade held kingship over limbo. In addition to the ability to create portals through spacetime, the sword acted as a focus and enhancer of magic, while also being a bane to the very things it empowered. This blade would harm no flesh of ordinary man. But a beast, construct, or wielder of magical energies would feel its sting as keen as any real sword. It was the soul sword, forged by Ilyana Rasputina. He glanced up at the Russian girl whose hand was now covered in eldritch mail, and a firm grip on the hilt. "Nice sword, Ilya-chan. Thanks." She pulled her weapon free, allowing it and her armor to dissipate before asking, "You alright?" Shakily he nodded, "I think so." Aoko gave her charge a once-over before calmly asking, "Izuku, will you be okay if I leave you here by yourself for a few?" Noticing Aoko had an odd air about her, he asked, "Aoko-sensei, is everything okay?" She graced him with a smile that was anything but reassuring, "Yeah, everything's fine Izuku. You wait here, I'll be right back." She walked off, and the wall of students parted as she passed. Izuku made to get up and follow her, feeling something was off only to hear a gruff voice say, "Don't bother kid. I've seen that look before. Nuttin' and none are gonna be able to stop her." He looked over to his left to see Logan smoking a cigar, Spider-Man standing nearby staying downwind of the smoking mutant. "Logan-san, what happened while I was out?" "We showed up and informed your guardian about what went down. She is less than happy right now. Probably going to voice her displeasure to Chuck and the others." The green-haired Magus nodded. Moments later an explosion rocked the mansion followed by several more. In between each blast, Izuku though he could hear Aoko yelling. "If your legs weren't already broken I'd rip them off. Bang, oughta skin you and turn you into a throw rug you blue furball. Bam, you'll be a cyclops when I'm done with you. Boom, turning into diamond won't save you, you ice-hearted harpy." Looking to the mansion and the continued explosions, Izuku felt sweat drip down his neck. "Should I be concerned?" "Nah, she promised she wouldn't kill him." Logan replied, before adding, "But if she did, she said she could revive him. Either way, they'll be alive at the end." Izuku. He turned his head to look at Ilyana, whose voice was soft. "You said you wanted to help the person who got you into this mess because you felt you owed him. You also said you grew up without a mutation." She paused, thinking of how to continue. "I felt you use magic. That's something you're either born with an aptitude for or granted by a higher power, did he?" The boy didn't see any point in hiding it. "Yes, he gave me the ability to use magic." Magic's face became solemn. "What did it cost you?" "Power always has a price. Magic especially so. Even white magic requires patronage to deities. Black magic can cost you your soul, or a piece of it anyway. He knew full well Ileana was speaking from experience, and he explained as best he could, I gave up a chance at ever having a normal life, in a place where being extraordinary was ordinary. I just wanted a chance to walk the path of a hero, now I have no choice but to walk it. No matter where it leads or how it ends. The MSTRS of Limbo seemed to grimace at that but quickly changed the topic, so, we have a lead, Shield. When should we leave? Looking to his friends, he asked, you still want to come with me even after everything I did earlier? Laura scoffed, it'll take more than a little temper tantrum to get rid of us. If anything it just means we need to keep a closer eye on you. The Dimension Traveler couldn't help but smile. He didn't know what he did to find such good friends, but he was glad to have them. Looking over at the two official heroes, Izuku called out, Logan-san, Spider-Man-san, I believe we have a lead. Do you happen to know anything about something called SHIELD? The two shared a look, we've heard of them. You think they're being held there? He ran through it all in his head. If they were there, great, that means he can get them and get out. If not, they probably had information he could use to find them. It was a win-win in his book. Yeah, I do. He called back. Great, when do we leave? Aoko called out. She didn't look any worse for the wear. No dust on her clothes or anything, not even a hair out of place. Either she was just that good, or she used time alteration after the fight to clean herself up. Aoko-sensei, are you sure you'll be able to handle this after? He let his sentence hang looking towards the mansion. Smiling she came over and ruffled his hair, don't you worry about that little man. I was just blowing off a little steam, and beating them senseless for trying to condone the assassination of a child. Izuku didn't catch her muttering heatedly under her breath, asked, what was that? Are you sure everything is okay? Giving him a smile, the fifth magician said, everything's fine. So are we going to get to this shield place? Leave that to me. I can get us there easily. Magic promised. Aoko raised an eyebrow looking at all the girls surrounding her young charge before saying, maybe I should change your nickname from Little Man to Lady Killer, eh? Please don't, he pleaded, hanging his head as a blush bloomed across his face. And quintuplets, really? Wow, you work fast. Aoko-sensei, he begged. The step-forward Cuckoos said as one clearly teasing voice, he really does. Girls, you're making it worse. The Magus moaned. The Russian couldn't help but throw her own 2 cents in, it's because he's so honest and tiny. Everything about him is cute. Magic added. He's blushing right now. It's also nice that he treats everyone the same, most people don't do that. Laura added sincerely. Yeah, he's like, a total cutie. Gotta agree with the redhead, he'll be a total lady killer when he grows up. Kitty said knowingly. Izuku finally lost it, can WEJ just go pee please? It was then the girls actually took notice of the boy they were teasing. His whole body was shaking, his fists especially. His ears were bright red, and it looked like you could cook an egg on his face, it was so red. Logan pushed off from the stonework he was leaning on, you heard the kid. Come on, we got a job to do. Magic, get a stepping disc working. Webs, take the point. Everyone else, behind me. Mouthing a silent sorry at the boy, Magic did as asked and opened up a white vortex and waited for everyone else to step inside before following after. Izuku knew, one way or another, this adventure, if it could be called that, was coming to an end, and soon. A fact he was silently thankful for. We're coming, Tatsuobi-san. Hang on just a little bit longer. We're coming. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 4. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author bubbajack on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video, till then goodbye.